Alright folks, you know what we do here on the channel. We talk about upcoming video games that we're excited about, and I'm excited about Spider-Man coming out for the PlayStation 4. What's that game called? Marvel's Spider-Man? That's a great title. That won't leave anyone confused. And what better way to start things off than by talking about what seems to be one of the main villains in that game, which is Mr. Negative. Now, Mr. Negative, he is not a very widely known villain, so I thought I'd bring you some knowledge, because he hasn't shown up a lot outside of comics, and not everyone reads the comics. But still, I believe a lot of you guys are asking, who the hell is this guy? What does he do? What can he do? Well, let's answer all of those questions with 10 things you need to know about Mr. Negative. And let's start with an example of something you don't need to know. And number 10, the first appearance of Mr. Negative was at the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 546. You don't need to know that. You don't need to know that. So that's the type of stuff we're not gonna do in this video, right? Okay, now for real, the number 10, let's begin with his name, his identity, his background. What did he do before he became Mr. Negative? So his name is Martin Lee. Martin Lee has a cover story. They say he's an illegal immigrant that came to the United States because he couldn't afford to bribe the communist society that was China, so his company was going down, so he illegally immigrated to the United States. The true story, though, is that he was a smuggler of Chinese immigrants. And the name Martin Lee is actually taken from one of those illegal immigrants, so that's not even his real name. No one knows what his real name is. So he was basically a thug. He was part of a gang called the Snakehead that did a lot of illegal immigrant stuff. Sold people to slavery. You know, common thug before he got his powers. And how did he get his powers? Well, that's our item number 9. He was kidnapped by a mafia-like gang called the Magia. The Magia at the time were experimenting a synthetic drug, and they were testing that drug on illegal immigrants. Most people died through these experiments, but Martin Lee was one of the few that survived and managed to escape. But he didn't escape as he was before, and you know how these things go. You got superpowers. But before we get to the superpowers, let's talk about this drug in specific, because this could actually be a very interesting plot point as well. And number 8, the drug is called D-Light. And D-Light is interesting because it is not of human origin. Yes, the Magia were the ones investigating and doing research on this drug because it is actually a very addictive drug. They were looking to replace heroin with this new drug that gave you like oh, super high. But the drug itself was actually created by a demon called D-Spire, and this guy, he feeds off negative emotions. Basically, he feeds off the effect that this drug has on humans. So that's why he was trying to spread it throughout the world. And heck, he could be the mastermind behind all of this in the new Spider-Man game, which is why I think it was important to talk about the drug specifically. And number 7, Martin Lee was not the only one who had survived these experiments. The characters that would later become known as Cloak and Dagger were also there, and they got injected with the same drug, but they got different powers because their organisms are different. The drug reacted different to different bodies. Most people it killed. These 3 guys, they got superpowers. So maybe they might make an appearance if they go into the origin story of Mr. Negative, or maybe they'll have their own take on it. We won't know until the game is out. Still, this is how it happened in the comics. We might see Cloak and Dagger in this game. But finally, let's get to what you guys have been waiting for. Let's get into the powers. So Mr. Negative can tap into the Dark Force and the Light Force. In layman's terms, it's magic of darkness and magic of light. What can he actually do with this energy though? Well, he has limited shape-shifting abilities. Even in the trailer, we see Martin Lee turning into Mr. Negative with that whole appearance. And that energy that surrounds him gives him super strength and superhuman reflexes. Something else we also see happening in the trailer is the ability he has to imbue weapons with the Dark Force, making the weapons stronger and more durable. But it's not all bad. He also has healing properties when he touches people. He can even cure cancer. We'll talk more about that later down this video. But just like he can cure cancer with his touch, he can also corrupt people with his dark touch. This kind of works like brainwashing. The people he touches, they see Mr. Negative as their new master. This dark touch can invert morals and personalities. It turned Spider-Man into a villain that wasn't afraid of killing. In the comics, at least. And we see the gameplay demo ends with Mr. Negative touching Spider-Man. What's gonna happen there? I'm gonna say probably nothing. The helicopter explodes and Spider-Man is totally fine, but it was like, oh, I felt something weird. Maybe it's an omen to what's gonna happen later down the game. Those are his powers. Moving on to number 5. What is this guy's deal? What are his new goals? Like, he was a thug before the experiment. Now he's got all these powers. What What's he trying to accomplish? Well, after the experiment, he set his sights on becoming Chinatown's kingpin of crime, because Chinatown's crime was mostly ruled by the Magia, and those are the guys he was trying to erase for what they had done to him. So that was his first goal coming out of that experiment, to keep being a criminal, of course. The first time he encountered Spider-Man in the comics, he actually was trying to take control of New York's criminal underworld. So it seems that his goals are rather straightforward. And number 4, we have to talk about his brand new henchman. It seems that he uses the corrupting touch a lot, because he has a legion of followers called the Inner Demons. I'm guessing we'll be fighting a lot of these guys. They usually hang around with high-tech electrified melee weapons. They can be swords, brass knuckles, even nunchucks at times. And important to note is that they are immortal. They regenerate wounds like no one else. You shoot them in the head, they'll regenerate that wound. You decapitate them, they'll regenerate that wound. Perhaps this is somewhat linked to Mr. Negative's healing powers, but he's able to give them permanently to these guys that he also corrupts. I don't know how it works. These Inner Demons also have enhanced strength, enhanced reflexes, enhanced agility, enhanced everything pretty much. Next, something that might be related to the plot at number 3, at some point, he was involved in politics. Not directly, but he endorsed a candidate for mayor in New York. And why is this important? Well, throughout the announcement trailer and the gameplay demo, we see that Norman Osborn is running for mayor. In fact, he's running for a re-election, which means he's the current mayor of New York. Seeing as Martin Lee has endorsed a politician for mayor in the past, maybe him and Norman Osborn aren't in the best of terms. Maybe they'll get involved somehow, whether that is as Martin Lee endorsing the rival candidate, or as Martin Lee turning into Mr. Negative and trying to sabotage Norman Osborn's campaign. We'll see. I think that would be pretty interesting to see something like that happen. And number 2, Mr. Negative essentially created the Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom, if you don't know, is a very popular character in the Spider-Man universe, but I don't think we'll see Anti-Venom in this game. Let me tell you how Anti-Venom came to be. Alright, you guys know Eddie Brock, right? Eddie Brock, the guy that was infected by the symbiote and then he became Venom that way. Well, Eddie Brock, later down the road, he gets cancer. And the symbiote leaves him because he wasn't a good host anymore. So sad Eddie Brock goes looking for a job, and Martin Lee gives him a job, and when he touches Eddie Brock, he actually cures him of the cancer. And the symbiote looks at Eddie Brock and is like, oh, he's a good host again, so let me infect him again, and then he becomes the Anti-Venom. This is a lot to cover in a single game, and that's why I don't think he'll show up. The seeds might be planted in this game, and it might happen in a sequel, but not in this game. That it's too much ground to cover. For more on this topic, click the card above. Check out Chris Baker's YouTube channel. He's a guy that has worked on a couple of Spider-Man games in the past, and he has some interesting points on the subject. So go ahead, check him out if you're curious about this topic in particular. But moving on to our number 1, this is a brand new universe. And Insomniac Games can just ignore everything we just told you. They can just throw everything out the window. It's important for you to know this stuff, but they can just throw it all out. So why did we waste our time watching this video? Well, it's actually pretty simple. This is the knowledge that the developers have going into the game. They can twist it, they can change the story, but it's interesting to know where they are coming from. I'm sure the developers will play with our expectations, with our knowledge of Mr. Negative's origin and powers and goals. And that is essentially why it is important to know who Mr. Negative is. These are 10 things you need to know. I think it pretty much covers everything. So if you have any extra facts, I mean, feel free to go down to the comments. I don't consider myself an expert in comics at all. I just thought I'd bring you some light on who Mr. Negative really is. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Like the video if you enjoyed it. And for more coverage of upcoming games, stick around. Check out this video on Darksiders 3 or this other one if you're in the mood for something else. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.